Hey guys, this is Morgan Zegers. I'm filling in for Buck Sexton today on Hold the Line, but we've got a really great lineup of guests today and some really fun topics. A lot's going on in the world. But first, we have to address some domestic issues, and by that, I mean our lovely president, Joe Biden. If you haven't seen yet, there's tons of footage going around of a recent press conference that he had, and there was just so many problems with it. Let's start out by seeing one of the most popular clips from it where he says he's outperforming the expectations for his leadership this year.
Is up. Your signature domestic legislation is stalled in Congress. In a few hours from now, the Senate, an effort in the Senate to deal with voting rights and voting reform legislation is going to fail. COVID-19 is still taking the lives of 1,500 Americans every day, and the nation's divisions are just as raw as they were a year ago. Did you overpromise to the American public what you could achieve in your first year in office, and how do you plan to course correct going forward?
Why are you such an optimist? Look, I didn't overpromise, but I have probably outperformed what anybody thought would happen.
Ugh, oh my gosh. So, my first thought on this is a lot of people look at Joe Biden and they say, how did we end up with someone like that in the White House? Now, I have a few theories. One of them, if he really was elected into office, I would say that it's because our founders really tried to make a government of, by, and for the people. And that meant our government and our leaders would be a reflection of the population. And I hate to say it, but right now I think America's full of weak people. And by that, I don't mean just physically weak. I think we do have some physical problems here in this country with obesity, especially in this time of COVID. You'd think people would have gotten healthier by now. But we have problems of mental weakness, spiritual weakness, moral weakness. And that leads to us, well, picking people to represent us that look like President Joe Biden or Speaker Nancy Pelosi, who is now being accused of insider trading. So when we have a population that is so morally decayed, of course, we're going to have leadership that reflects that. Now, I always wonder, what do the people in the press pool think when they watch the interactions between President Biden and the journalists? For years, we heard them complain that President Trump was some totalitarian evil dictator that didn't support the First Amendment. But what are they thinking now when they see our President Joe Biden attack press, call them stupid basically to their face, and really just demean them publicly during press conferences? Let's see what he just did to a recent reporter at the press conference he had this week.
You know, you campaigned and you ran on a return to civility, and I know that you dispute the characterization that you called folks who would oppose those voting bills as being Bull Connor or George Wallace, but you said that they would be sort of in the same camp.
No, I didn't say that. Look what I said. Go back and read what I said and tell me if you think I called anyone who voted on the side of the position taken by Bull Connor that they were Bull Connor. And that is an interesting reading of English. I assume you got into journalism because you like to write.
Oh my gosh. A few thoughts on this. First, as a young woman, if any man speaks to me like this, and I think it's always taught to young women, if a man speaks to you like this, it's probably not a safe situation. I don't think we've ever been able to see before a president screaming or very aggressively attacking anybody, especially someone in the press. Now, I would say we haven't exactly been living under these concerning issues during the presidency of Donald Trump. It's actually Joe Biden who is attacking the First Amendment. And we specifically see that with a lot of my friends in conservative media that get demonetized, removed from platforms, especially when they try and cover things like COVID-19. Now, speaking of a lot of cover-ups, let's talk about what's happening right now with the voting rights lies that are being spread. Let's see this recent clip.
Maybe I'm just being too much of an optimist. Remember how we thought not that many people were going to show up to vote in the middle of a pandemic? We had the highest voter turnout in the history of the United States of America. Well, I think if, in fact, no matter how hard they make it for minorities to vote, I think you're going to see them willing to stand in line and defy the attempt to keep them from being able to vote. I think you're going to see the people we're trying to keep from being able to show up, showing up and making the sacrifice that needs to be made in order to change the law back to what it should be.
What the heck? I really hope it's an issue like this that really wakes Americans up. The left is telling us that it is racist to require people to show an ID to just vote and partake in the most important process that will keep our republic going. And then they also say that they want to require anybody, especially people of color in the city areas, to show an ID or a Vax card just to eat food and go shopping or get any food at a restaurant. It's really disturbing when you see this, but it's pretty in line with their usual tactics. Because just as they said it was the GOP and the conservatives that are questioning the legitimacy of an election, what do you know? Just like Hillary Clinton did in 2016, we're now already seeing that with President Biden's statements about his questioning the future election legitimacy if we don't move forward with the nationalization of elections. Let's see that.
Thank you, Mr. President. Speaking of voting rights legislation, if this isn't passed, do you still believe the upcoming election will be fairly conducted and its results will be legitimate?
Well, it all depends on whether or not we're able to make the case to the American people that some of this is being set up to try to alter the outcome of the election.
So one of my favorite books is The Road to Serfdom by Charles Kessler, or not by Charles Kessler, The Road to Serfdom by Friedrich Hayek. Sorry, I have a lot of books in my head. And in that, he talks about how socialists throughout history have distorted the meanings of words, of phrases, of basic language that humans use in a society in order to control the narrative. And I think not only do we see that when they call conservative women sexist, I mean, what the heck does that even mean? I get called a sexist all the time for being a conservative woman that stands against these feminazis out there. But they also do it with things like just achieving justice and fighting racism and achieving progress in society. And we see that a lot with election integrity. Now, moving forward, I'm really concerned about this because I have a father who's a colonel in the military. He served in Operation Iraqi Freedom. I'm from a military family. My mom has always taken care of me and my sister when my dad was out serving overseas. And what do you know? We have an incredibly weak president that completely disrespected our nation on the international stage with what happened in Afghanistan. We betrayed our allies. We abandoned citizens and our allies overseas. They're still stuck there. And what do you know? He's already getting us in hot water with Russia and the Ukraine. So let's see what he recently said about that one.
Russia will be held accountable if it invades. And it depends on what it does. It's one thing if it's a minor incursion and then we end up having a fight about what to do and not do, et cetera.
All right. So that being said, I think it's pretty safe to say that a lot of people are frustrated. But what's going to happen next? That's why I am really excited for the upcoming slate of guests. We've got young people that are involved across the country, whether they're running for office or they're leading the grassroots efforts, or they're taking control of media and pop culture that have really been controlled by the left for far too long. My suggestion moving forward, though, is to pay attention to what's happening in public education and the education of people of all ages in America. We're getting wrong information, whether it's in the classrooms or whether it's from mass media or whether it's from pop culture and what we're getting from Hollywood. And the more we become indoctrinated with this information, the more we're going to put this country at in a concerning position because we're going to elect people like Joe Biden who put this country into a terrible position. That being said, let's move into the next segment and stay tuned because we have Karoline Leavitt coming up, a congressional candidate from New Hampshire. All right, guys, welcome back to Hold the Line, usually hosted by Buck Sexton, but today guest hosted by me, Morgan Zegers. We have an exciting guest this segment. Her name is Karoline Leavitt, and she's running for Congress up in New Hampshire. She's quite a unique candidate, though, and she's tackling issues that, honestly, our side, the conservative side, just is not touching on these days, and it's really a shame, especially as a young woman. So I'm excited by her candidacy, and Karoline, thank you for taking the time to come on. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Morgan. I thought I would be with Buck today, but I have to say I'm quite excited to be speaking with you because I know you do a lot of great work tackling these issues as well. So thanks for that.
Oh, of course. Well, honestly, that's one of my first questions is you are able to be such a unique candidate and you don't get as much credit as people like AOC do on the other side. Conservative women never do. We never get those magazine covers and stuff, but I think it's because we're honestly more focused on the work. And so how's your experience been launching the candidacy and being able to utilize all the technology that our generation is really capable of utilizing?
Well, thank you for asking. So I'm running in my home seat. It's New Hampshire's first congressional district. It's actually historically one of the swingiest districts in the country, but it is looking like it's going to be a very conservative election this cycle. I'm running against my Democrat incumbent representative, Chris Pappas. And I made the decision to launch myself into this campaign really for a couple of reasons. First, this is my home state, and I was getting sick and tired of watching this Democrat vote in line with Nancy Pelosi to push their communist agenda through the House of Representatives. I come from a small business family where I was taught, very young, nothing is given, everything is earned. And I feel as though he's really out of touch with our values. And I had the opportunity, the honor of a lifetime, really, to work for President Trump in the White House. I worked on Kayleigh McEnany's team in the press office, and I saw how exceptional the America First agenda truly was. And I want to be a part of that, advancing that through the House of Representatives. And then lastly, I chose to run for the issues. The reason you mentioned is we live, Morgan, you and I, amongst an entire generation of voters who do not think the way that we do. In fact, they overwhelmingly vote Democrat. And so living in this generation, seeing what was out there on social media, really watching the left seize every institution in our country is deeply concerning to me, and I want to do something about it. So I left Washington and returned home. We launched the campaign 6 months ago. We've raised nearly $1 million. We've outraised our opponents, who are establishment opponents who have both run for office before, with individual donors from here in New Hampshire by far. The people are with us. It's a true grassroots campaign, and it's really exciting.
I love that. Now, you have quite a lot of work to do if you do get elected, and I wish you the best of luck. I'm curious, what are your thoughts when it comes to going up against the radical leftist faction like the AOC and Squad versus the establishment elites and the liberal elites, like you see with Nancy Pelosi? And then you also have to deal with the GOP establishment and the rhinos that are there, and they're getting a lot of heat as well. Do you have a specific focus that you plan to take on once you get to DC?
Yeah, absolutely. Several issues we want to tackle when I am elected. And I will say this, the establishment on both sides, when I said I wanted to run for Congress, laughed in my face. They said, absolutely not. We have our hand picked for this district. There's no way you're going to win. You won't be able to raise money. Well, we've been smashing expectations ever since we launched this thing. And that's because the people are with us. And that's what matters to me at the end of the day. And I'll tell you, voters in my district, they want me to go down to DC and champion a few issues. First, education. We have to get the federal government's interference in our education system out. I went to our public schools in New Hampshire. We can do a hell of a lot better. We need to increase our academic standards, get the federal government out, ensure state and local control, and make sure parents have a voice. Look, I'm running for federal office, but I love going to school board meetings and supporting great school board candidates who are stepping up across our state. I sat in a diner last week with a dad who said, I hate politics, but I am so fed up with seeing the homework that my daughter is bringing home. So I want to champion their voices at the federal level and ensure that we are reallocating those resources that the Department of Ed eats up every single year to our state and local government here in New Hampshire. And then secondly, standing up for our small business owners. Look, they've been getting absolutely squeezed by this administration. The un-American, unconstitutional vaccine mandate put a lot of our businesses here in New Hampshire in a really tricky position. My goal ultimately is to get the feds out of our everyday lives, out of our elections, out of our education system, out of our economy, and just to protect the freedom-loving people in this state. We are the live free or die state. We're overwhelmingly fiscally conservative. We have no income tax, no sales tax. We are a great place to live, but our federal delegation has been voting along with the communists in Washington, D.C. So this is the year that we're going to do it. And there's just so many issues: big tech, ensuring free speech, ensuring individual liberty, closing down our southern border, re-implementing all those effective immigration policies of the previous administration that I was honored to work under. So we have a lot of work to do, and it starts by electing people with spines of steel. We cannot have these weak Republicans who have allowed the left to seize every institution in our country and push this agenda. And that's why we are in this position. So we really got to shake up Washington, D.C. And I'm really excited. There's a lot of young candidates like myself who are stepping up to do that.
That's exciting. And I've got to say, it's really nice to hear somebody running for a federal position that understands not all problems need to be solved by the federal government. AOC, I'm sure you saw this, got a lot of heat on Twitter when she blamed conservative men just wanting to date her for their reasons for criticizing her policy decisions and her hypocrisy. And so I think you and I and other conservative women were really blessed with the opportunity to call her out when it comes to her terrible policies. And I like to say, you know what, throw me in there. I'm 25, I'm a young woman, I'm not interested in dating her. And I'll tell her to her face that her policies are dangerous and deadly when implemented, because that's what socialism is. Now,
Mhm.
what is also important is protecting women's issues, true women's issues. And by that, I mean things like protecting women's sports. I just read a recent op ed that you wrote and I loved it. I'm really glad that you're championing this because barely anyone is talking about it. Can you tell us what's going on there and why did you choose to speak out on this issue?
Yeah, well, thank you for reading it and for sharing it. And I hope all of your listeners do go and read my op ed. It was in the Boston Herald and the Washington Examiner, and it's on my Twitter and my Getter. I actually literally canceled my plans on a Friday evening to stay home like a nerd and write that op ed for myself because I was so infuriating watching Leah Thomas, who is a man, a biological male, literally crush her opponents in a swim meet. And I'm a former NCAA athlete. I played softball growing up my entire life. I sacrificed many days practicing and working hard to receive an athletic scholarship and attend a college here in New Hampshire to do that. So it's unfathomable to me if a man had come and taken my position of third baseman on any team I've ever played on in my life. So I feel so passionate about this issue because here's the thing that people need to understand. This is a violation of federal law. It is a violation of Title IX, which was signed in 1972 to protect fairness and safety in competition in female athletics. And we have seen for many decades now this regression of the left pushing their perverse worldview onto our society. And conservative leaders have failed to speak up, have failed to say that no, this is not okay. Men and women are inherently different but equal, and we cannot allow for these injustices to occur. So I am so tired of seeing this happen. Our society is demoralized, and it is going to crumble if we don't push back on the left's war on masculine men and women. And again, where are all the feminists, Morgan? Where's AOC standing up for Leah Thomas's teammates and those who she just crushed in the swimming pool against? I feel so sorry for these women, and so I want to be a really strong voice for them. And I will go on the House floor and fight for them all day long when I'm elected to Congress.
Thank you for doing that. Thank you for making the uncomfortable decision to champion these kind of issues that people don't really want to touch on. I've got to say, it's a leftist tale as old as time, right? To promise progress and deliver regress. Caroline, thank you so much. And thank you for taking the time. We appreciate it. You guys stay tuned because speaking of sports, we are going to bring on John Root, the host of a sports and politics show, Breakaway, to talk about what's going on with the Chinese Olympics and the CCP, what they're doing to threaten athletes and prevent them from speaking out. All right, welcome back, you guys. I am so excited for this next guest. We have John Root. He is the host of Turning Point USA's Breakaway, a sports and politics show. And with everything going on in the news, especially the Olympics coming up, and we recently saw some troubling news from one of the co-owners of the Warriors, the basketball team, about what's going on in communist China, saying he doesn't care about it. I couldn't think of a better person to come and talk about this. So, John, welcome, and thank you for joining.
Thanks. Well, it's awesome. I feel like you're guest hosting a lot of shows, so I'm happy to keep this thing rolling. And I mean, for stories like this is the reason that Breakaway exists. I'm happy to talk about the right side of the conversation because you're not going to hear it from ESPN. Like this story that you just talked about with the minority owner for the Golden State Warriors, Shamit Palihapitiya, owns about 10% of the Golden State Warriors. He's a Silicon Valley billionaire, and he showed his billionaire privilege. He basically said, "This is below my line. I don't care about genocide." And it just goes to show that the NBA is in bed with the CCP. They will not do anything to call out or try to keep China accountable. It's disgusting.
Yeah, I mean, we see it all the time. I think LeBron is specifically the one we always go after, but I was really surprised to see this behind the scenes kind of guy. He didn't have to say it. You know what I mean? What a terrible decision for him to make, PR wise and just morally. It was pretty shocking for me to see that, but it finally shows what's going on behind the curtain. Like you said, I can't think of a greater time for something like Breakaway to start. Can you explain why you started that and how that's going, really giving voice to more conservative and pro freedom views in the sports world?
Well, I've been working in sports media for a long time. It's almost been a decade now. So before I started working at Turning Point USA, I was working for the San Jose Sharks. I actually worked for the Golden State Warriors organization. So Shamit, I have actually seen before, never actually met the guy, but I was in the inner circles there, knew a lot of people, and I knew that I had to be silent about a lot of my conservative views. I was afraid to like stuff on Twitter. Like I was following Charlie, I was following Clay Travis, I was following Ben Shapiro, and I knew if something came up on my Twitter feed, I wouldn't be able to move up to the network level, which is eventually where everybody wants to get when you work in sports media. And I was listening to Clay Travis quite a bit. I know Buck works with him every single week, pretty much every single day, and he was the only one talking about the right side of the conversation, the conservative side of sports, because politics are in sports already, whether we like it or not. I don't like it, but you deserve to hear the other side of the conversation, the other side of the discussion, the other side of the argument. And that's what we're giving you here at Breakaway. And it feels freeing to be able to say this stuff without fear of being canceled. It's amazing.
Yeah, I agree. And speaking of that, let's just see this clip of this co-owner and really how aggressive he was about not caring about a genocide.
Nobody cares about what's happening to the Uyghurs, okay? You bring it up because you really
What?
care, and I think
What do
that's
you mean
nice that
nobody
you
cares?
care. The rest of us don't care. I'm telling you a very hard, ugly truth, okay? Of all the things that I care about, yes, it is below my line.
Ugh, I mean, I would say he's saying the quiet part out loud on accident, but it seems like they just really have no shame anymore and they're fine with admitting that this is very low priority to care about a genocide occurring in this planet. I mean, we said never again after what happened with Nazi Germany, but I guess people have already forgotten. I attribute that to the failure of the education system here in America. But that being said, with everything going on, John, isn't the Olympics happening in communist China pretty soon?
Exactly. It's happening in just about a couple weeks. And, I think when Press Secretary Jen Psaki, she said genocide when she announced that there's going to be a diplomatic boycott. I thought that was important that she said genocide and finally being able to admit that. But 10, 15, 20 years from now, no one's going to remember, what delegate from the United States was there. They're going to remember if our athletes were there. And then now we're hearing stories that you have delegations from the United States, the UK, and some other delegations from across the globe telling their athletes it's probably not a good idea to bring your personal mobile devices out to China because of spying out there. They're telling them to buy burner phones, and there's genocide happening here. And don't forget, China ruined our lives for a couple years. They lied about the coronavirus, and they've lied to us consistently. We've had this Biden administration coddled and not holding them accountable for ruining small businesses, ruining our lives, and then they get the honor of hosting the Olympics. This does not hold to the Olympic standard whatsoever, and it's disgusting. And I just hope that our athletes are going to be safe, because I'm worried about that mostly.
Yeah, there's so many elements to this. First of all, like you said, with the athletes being told you can't even bring your phone, or we at least suggest you don't. Most people in this country have no idea what's really going on in communist China. And again, it attributes back to the failure of the education system. But I'm happy in a way that this is going to bring a lot of attention to what's going on over there. And so for a lot of young Americans, this might be the first time they hear about the horrors that occur in this communist country. I am worried, though, because I saw that there are advocacy groups saying that the Olympics Committee cannot protect athletes if they choose to speak out about human rights and against the CCP while they're there competing. Now, what have you heard on this? And are you hearing any rumblings of if athletes are going to try this, or do you think that athletes these days just don't care enough to even attempt it? Safety versus taking the risk of speaking out for freedom and for human rights. What is going to go on?
Well, I think athletes are terrified, and I think people should be terrified of the CCP. But I think we had the opportunity to take care of them and take a stronghold of especially the International Olympic Committee's Rule 50. The Rule 50 is no political demonstrations during the games, but they started being a little wishy-washy about it, during the Tokyo Games and then during the trials here in the United States, where there was a lot of BLM talk and a lot of people took their stance and didn't stand up for the flag, or they turned the other way. And now we have to know what's happening overseas. And I think it's important you use your platform like that all the time, Morgan, and tell people like, all right, we're not just going to complain about it. I'm going to educate you about what's going on overseas, and then this is how we fight it. And I am scared for our athletes because they're even being told there's restrictions that they can't talk in elevators or other closed spaces, and they're not supposed to cheer. They're supposed to just clap for their teammates out there. And then I know yesterday, Shang Xu, that's the Director General of Beijing's 2022 International Relations Department, he was saying that anybody that went against or violated the Olympic spirit would be punished by China and Chinese authorities. So they're trying to silence these athletes. And honestly, as an athlete, if you stand up for actually what's right and try to tell people the truth and use that platform, I don't know if they'll make it back to the United States, if we're going to be quite frank.
Yeah, I see this going very badly in so many ways. There's just too much opportunity for people to get hurt here in a serious way. We're not just dealing with a little fighting between, Putin and Biden about who's sending the more serious press statement. Instead, we're dealing with the CCP that disappears doctors, reporters, and even athletes. I mean, that tennis star that got disappeared after she accused one of the CCP officials. Yeah, she accused a CCP official of what, sexual assault, and she got disappeared. And in communist China, that means you're going probably to a camp. And so I saw that as one of the first times American athletes that are usually on the sidelines, usually quiet about this stuff, they started speaking out about where is she? And so I'm really worried about that. I hope young people are starting to wake up as they see this in the headlines, what these requirements are and what the restrictions are on the athletes. My last thought is, can you just say, what is the deal here with, was the failure on our leadership here in America to put this on the shoulders of athletes? I don't even think this should be a debate on should athletes speak up or not, should they try and defy the CCP while they're over there or not, because I don't think this should be even occurring. Why are we trying to make this happen? I think we should have made a leadership decision a long time back saying we're not going to allow this to take place. We won't compete.
Yeah, it comes from leadership, where I don't say this lightly when I say that we should totally boycott the Olympics. And I've been talking about this on Breakaway for months and months. I know people like Enes Kanter Freedom, he's used his platform to say that as well. And I don't say that lightly because a lot of these athletes, this could be their first and only Olympics. This could be their last Olympics. But when it comes to something like this, there's things that are more important than gold, silver, or bronze medals. This is about human rights, and this is about remembering this time in history. Did we really stand for what is right? No, we're not. And it shouldn't be on athletes because they're stuck between a rock and a hard place where even with a lot of the COVID restrictions, they're terrified to say anything about vaccinations. They're terrified to say really anything that goes against a leftist narrative. And then especially, too, if you say something against China, I think they think and know that leadership does not have their back. So I think rightfully so, they're terrified, and it comes from leadership, and it comes from the top down. A diplomatic boycott is not enough. We should have made this call a month ago, maybe even a year ago. They shouldn't even have got the Olympics in the first place. So now athletes are in this place where they're just going to go out there and they're going to try to keep their mouth shut. They're going to try to stay safe, and they're going to try to win medals. And that's probably the only thing these athletes can do to stay safe.
It's a shame. It's a shame, John. Thank you for sharing your expertise on this. You guys stay tuned because the next guest that we have is Austin Smith. He is on the ground in one of the hottest campaign states in the country. We're talking Arizona, where we have the Carrie Lake campaign. A lot of people say she's like Ron DeSantis. We see people like Blake Masters from Silicon Valley taking leadership in his Senate campaign. And Austin's going to tell us all about it. Stay tuned after the break. All right, welcome back to Hold the Line. This is Morgan Zegers. I'm filling in for Buck Sexton, the great host of this show. And I am so excited because my friend is joining us for this next segment. His name is Austin Smith, and he is the chairman of the Arizona Young Republicans. Now, I just moved to Arizona, and I can tell you what, this is one of the spiciest, most important states moving forward in campaign season. And I think Austin is just working so hard at the ground level. So, Austin, thank you for taking the time to join us today.
Morgan, it's an honor to be here. Thank you. Didn't think I was ever going to get the chance to come on, but I appreciate you bringing me on to know how important Arizona is, and I appreciate that you recognize how important Arizona is.
Of course. Well, I just think we have so many exciting candidates coming up, and we just had President Trump here for the Arizona rally that I was at. I'm not sure if you were able to see that too, but it got me thinking that we've really got to talk about how Arizona is going to reflect nationwide. My first question, though, for you: every time I see you, you're talking about local politics and getting involved. So, can you talk about what you're doing at the ground level, specifically with encouraging this activism at the precinct level?
Right. So local politics reflect national values. And one thing that we're really big and keen on at the Arizona Young Republicans and in my professional capacity with Turning Point Action is we focus at the precinct level. If you're not familiar with what a precinct is, it's the culmination of like where you live. It's essentially just your neighborhood of all the voters that live in your neighborhood. And so at Turning Point Action and the Arizona Young Republicans, we're very focused on hitting these precinct levels, recruiting people to be precinct committeemen. If you don't know what a precinct committeeman is, it's the official representation of the Republican Party in your neighborhood. And so you might ask, why is that important? Because local politics reflect national values. From the White House all the way down to your state legislature, to your city council, your county commissioner, your county recorder, your county board of supervisors, these precincts make up the rest of our country. And so when you see a map and it's covered in red and you've got speckles of blue somewhere, that's all the way down to the precincts. And why that is so important is because this is where you turn out the vote. This is where people go to vote. This is where people live. This is where people go to school, where they send their kids to school, where they go to church. These little local values reflecting the national values go into the midterm elections, go into the general presidential elections. And, you know, before Turning Point Action, a lot of groups other than traditional Republican parties have focused on these precincts. And what we do is we try to bring in and usher in after 2020. Most people are like, okay, what do we do now? Now that Donald Trump is gone, they don't know what to do. So we said, okay, you need to be a precinct committeeman. And so we, recruited thousands of them across the country in key areas in battleground states and in certain congressional districts that are going to play heavily in 2022, taking back the House. And what we did was that, it was like, okay, guys, let's get a new generation of young conservatives here who are active through the MAGA movement that still want to be involved. And that's what we did at Turning Point Action at the Arizona Young Republicans. And so we've recruited hundreds of people under the age of 35 and 40 years old to be precinct committeemen across Arizona. And 800 alone in Maricopa County. And if anybody paid attention to Maricopa County, this audit that was initiated there happened because of precinct committeemen. If you're passionate about election integrity, you have to be a precinct committeeman. And that's something that we focus on heavily here in Arizona.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better. I completely agree. And it's huge what you guys have been doing at the local level here. I've seen it just in the few months that I've lived here. And especially at the Arizona Trump rally, I did a double take when I heard the applause for when the governor candidate came up on stage, Carrie Lake. Can you actually, first, let's see a little clip from her speech, and then I want to get your thoughts on what's going on with that campaign, because she's getting national attention now.
In 7 short months, Joe and Kamala have managed to destabilize the entire world. Think about that. In 7 months, they've run this country into the ground, and I will be damned if I let them run Arizona into the ground.
Austin, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, Carrie Lake was, I'm a 5th generation Arizonan, and Carrie had been on TV every night in my house for 20-something years. And, she never really took big political positions on things in the past. People kind of hit her for it, but this is who she is. Our country has changed in the last 2 or 3 years. I remember watching a video of her being interviewed by a local liberal reporter here in Arizona, and they asked them, why did you get all of a sudden, involved in politics locally here in Arizona? What made you want to step up? And she was like, are you serious? Have you seen the way the country's been going the last 3 or 4 years? Have you seen from 2020 with the COVID lockdowns? And so it's no surprise that she's gaining this massive momentum, because she's talking about issues that everyday Arizonans care about. From Mojave County, Maricopa County, Pinal, Pima, she's hitting all these important issues: vaccine mandates, lockdowns, CRT, putting kids back in the classrooms, finishing the wall. And the reason why, and going after the liberal corporate press, the Biden regime, and she's being honest and truthful about it. Her scripts aren't consultant approved. She's not just hitting these talking points that, all these candidates that do in the past. She's hitting real issues. She's being real and genuine. She's talking about truthful things that matter. And it's no surprise that she's almost gaining 40%. And it's nothing against the other candidates that are running for governor. These are good people, but people really want that outsider change. They really want somebody that can go toe to toe with the corporate media and the Arizona repugnant and tell them off and say, we're not going to take it anymore. I'm going to go to the state capitol. And I'm going to take a sledgehammer to the corporate media. And people agree with that. It's not just some slogan. They really, really do believe that they have been pitted against one another by the corporate media, by the political elite, and Kerry resonates with them because she knows how to take them on so much like Donald Trump did. And I think that's why you're seeing here in Arizona, there's kind of a reflection of what happened in the 2016 Republican presidential primary is playing out here in Arizona with Kerry Lake. And so it'll be very interesting to see. August is a long way from now. And if somebody overtakes her at 40%, that will be absolutely incredible.
Yeah. Okay. So last person, really quick. I think we have a little extra time. Talk about Blake Masters. Can we play a clip from his recent video?
This is a short-barreled rifle. It wasn't designed for hunting. This is designed to kill people. But if you're not a bad guy, I support your right to own one. The Second Amendment is not about duck hunting. It's about protecting your family and your country. What's the first thing the Taliban did when Joe Biden handed them Afghanistan? They took away people's guns. That's how it works. I'm Blake Masters. I'm running for the U.S. Senate in Arizona, and I approve this message.
Geez, Austin, what I see when I see that is bold leadership. He's saying things that not a lot of Republicans or conservatives even say these days, and I'm loving it. Do you think he's going to succeed?
Well, that's just based Blake for you. I'm lucky to call Blake a friend. And, at the Arizona Young Republicans, we have this initiative nationally, Recruit, Train, Win, and Blake is a young Republican on the ballot for the United States Senate. And you're seeing that, you don't see that very often, especially this day and age when the median age is almost 60, 70 years old for United States senators. And Blake is a new up-and-coming candidate for the United States Senate, and he says things that resonate with people. And I think that's why he's kind of surging right now in Arizona and kind of on the heels of Attorney General Brnovich, because he's not saying these consultant-approved catchphrases. He's being real. He's being genuine. He's talking about these issues that matter. The Second Amendment one video is clear as day that we can talk about all the time. I'm here to protect the Second Amendment and so on, and these nomenclatures, but Blake is talking about this gun is designed to kill people. If you're a gun owner, a responsible one, you know that. And so people are done and tired with this consultant-approved catchphrases, and Blake is showing us as a new, young, bold, conservative leader coming up through Arizona. This is the land of Barry Goldwater, and Barry Goldwater was very, very bold just like that, and that's why I think Blake is gaining momentum now, is because he's taking that strong approach of being bold, talking about issues that people care about, talking about things that actually matter. He's not just talking about making sure that we have another tax cut in the next Republican Congress, but really going after these issues that matter at the core of our country. And I think that's why Blake is gaining national attention now.
Coming up is tonight's Quick Hits. Stay right there. Okay, you guys, let's wrap this up with quick hits. Welcome back to Hold the Line. First, we need to talk about this weird hypocrisy with liberal men and their desire to hurt women who decide to speak out against them politically. Usually, it's liberal men against conservative women. I get a lot of hate all the time, and maybe I'll talk about that after. But let's look at this tweet from Robert Reich, where he said, quote, "Tonight, Republican senators lined up to shake Kyrsten Sinema's hand. Democratic senators should have given her the backs of their hands." What? Are you kidding me? Now, I'm 25 years old. I run a nonprofit called Young Americans Against Socialism. So you could say that the Antifa people out there, the violent ones that are out there terrorizing our city streets whenever they get upset about policy, they don't exactly like me. I mean, I recently also discovered communist Antifa Reddit, and I have a few things posted about me there that I need to report to the police. So it's a very usual situation for conservative women and any women that decide to speak out against leftist or liberal policies to get this kind of hate. But man, even going against their own Democratic side, a Democratic senator, I'm pretty surprised. Now, moving on, another interesting situation of strong women, I guess. Look at this reporter as she gets hit by a car on live television and pops right back up. This is so strange.
And now we're starting to experience, unfortunately, in freeze thaw, we see this, water main breaks.
Got hit by a car, but I'm okay. I just got hit by a car, but I'm okay, Tim.
That's the first for you on
okay.
TV, Tori.
Woo! We're all good. I'm okay. Yeah, you know, that's live TV for you. It's all good. I actually got hit by a car in college, too, just like that.
Wow.
I am so glad I'm okay.
Yeah.
You're okay. You're okay. We're all good. This is, you know what? It's, one
sure
woman
you're
band.
okay, Tori?
We're good, Tim. Ma'am,
sure you're
you
okay?
are so sweet and you are okay. It is all good. You know, oh, Lord.
Oh man, so I was so impressed by her just professionalism as she gets hit by the car and she pops up and she actually comforts the driver of the car that hit her. It's fantastic to watch. I even looked her up on social media and she's just an average, hardworking young woman that was working hard at her job one day and gets hit by a car, pops right back up. I would say this is like a metaphor, symbolism for what America's going to look like once we get Joe Biden out of office, but I digress. Now, speaking of this terrible administration, let's talk about the highest paid bureaucrat in our country, completely undeserving of this amount of money. Dr. Fauci recently got exposed for having all of this art of himself around his office. And I'm talking like a situation where you should have a mural of George Washington on your wall and making a nice stare off into the distance, all powerful like. Instead, Dr. Fauci has one of himself, which I just find perfect for the situation with this guy. I've got to say, I don't watch a lot of TV. Of course, I watch Hold the Line with Buck Sexton every night. Of course, nobody tell Buck that I'm never watching his show. But when I'm doing things and when I want to watch content, I actually watch hours of the Dr. Fauci footage from his testimony and hearings on Capitol Hill when senators and congresspeople grill him for his terrible behavior throughout COVID. It's something that brings me joy to watch him being held accountable. And I've got to say, speaking of this hypocrisy that we see these days, let's look at a supercut of all this fake news going around and the smears that went after Justice Gorsuch recently.
Tragically, anti-mask insanity has now reached the highest court in the land.
Neil Gorsuch is prioritizing his right to be a tool over protecting Sonia Sotomayor's life.
Gorsuch loves COVID, which makes him the perfect Republican. He thinks very little of coronavirus precautions.
Gorsuch has the nerve to refuse to wear a mask indoors while seated next to his colleague who's vulnerable to possible death from a highly communicable disease. Where's the collegiality? Where's the common sense?
That just seems ridiculous. Can you put a mask on to be polite?
What kind of workplace is this?
It's not hard.
Justice Gorsuch had to know that this would become a public controversy, and so I think he did this as a branding opportunity.
Classic media behavior. If you ask me, I think the mass media is just doing the dirty work of the bureaucracy inside of the executive branch, basically helping the federal government push out their own propaganda that helps their side. If we don't stop this, we are never going to see the end of Dr. Fauci's tirade. We're never going to see the end of masks. And I was so excited to see the end of masks, of COVID passports, of even social distancing suggestions over there in England when I saw Prime Minister Boris Johnson announce that this week. Congrats to them, but unfortunately, there's so many liberals, there's so many leftists in America that are refusing the science and want to keep us locked down and masked up forever. I hope Justice Gorsuch does not get offended by these attacks and he just pushes through, because when you bend to the left, you're never going to recover after that. Now, that being said, thank you guys so much. We are all out of time for this episode of Hold the Line. I really appreciate Buck allowing me to guest host for him while he was out today. Thank you so much, Buck, for doing so, and we should finish in his honor by saying shield tie.